son-in-law sent me a text on a Tuesday evening. Just 6 words. "Get lost, old man. You done." I read it twice in my truck, parked in the driveway of the house I'd built with my own hands. Then I set my phone face down on the passenger seat, started the engine, and drove to the hardware store. I needed wood screws. And I needed to think. My name is Douglas Harlan. I'm 64 years old, retired from 31 years in commercial construction management out of Knoxville, Tennessee. I know how buildings work. I know how foundations crack. Slowly, invisibly, until the day they don't. I should have seen this one coming. I thought I was watching it. Turns out I was just watching the wrong wall. My daughter Paige was the kind of child who made everything feel earned. She worked summers at the feed store, put herself through 2 years of community college before I helped her finish at UT. Never once asked for more than I offered. When she was growing up, people would say she had my stubbornness and her mother's heart, and they meant it as a compliment. Carol passed when Paige was 23. Breast cancer, 14 months from diagnosis to the end. Those 14 months changed both of us in ways I'm still finding out. She met my son-in-law 6 months after her mother's funeral. I'll call him what he was, her husband. His name's Corbin. I'll give him his name because it fits him. Sharp consonants, nothing soft about it. He was 31 when they met, working as a regional sales rep for a medical supply company. Solid job, decent salary, nice enough at the dinner table. I thought he was temporary. I don't mean that as an insult. I just knew Paige, and I'd seen the men she'd cycled through after grief, companions for a season. Corbin lasted past the season. He proposed after 8 months. She said yes at a restaurant in Gatlinburg, without telling me in advance. I congratulated them. Genuinely. I was happy if she was happy. That's what you tell yourself when you mean it. They rented an apartment in West Knoxville the first year. Corbin kept his sales job. Paige worked in HR for a hospital system. Between them, they made decent money, not wealthy, but stable. Then Corbin decided he wanted to start his own business, medical equipment leasing, he explained over Thanksgiving dinner. He had contacts, he had relationships. He just needed startup capital and a temporary place to operate while he built the client base. Temporary. There's that word. I had a workshop behind my house, 4-car garage. I'd converted into a proper workspace over 20 years of weekends. Router table, table saw, dust collection system, everything organized on French cleats, the way I liked it. I built furniture in that shop. Cabinets for neighbors, a dining table for Carol that we never got to eat enough meals at. It was mine in the way that very few things in a man's life feel entirely his. Corbin asked if he could use one bay. Just one, he said. Just until he had enough clients to justify renting office space. 6 months, maybe 8. Paige looked at me the way she'd looked at me as a girl when she wanted something she didn't quite believe she'd get. I said yes. That was 3 years and 4 months ago. The 1 bay became 2. The 2 became all 4 when Corbin decided he needed room for inventory, demonstration units, he called them. My router table got moved to the corner. My French cleats got taken down on one wall to make room for a shelving system he ordered from Amazon. He offered to pay for the shelving. I said it wasn't necessary. I shouldn't have said that. Paige and Corbin moved into my house 14 months in, after Corbin's first venture hit a rough patch, and they couldn't make rent. Temporary again. I gave them the guest bedroom. Then they asked about the larger room because Corbin needed somewhere to take calls without background noise. I moved my home office into a closet. Literally. I set up a folding table in the coat closet off the hallway because the main office had better light for Corbin's video conferences. You notice these things and you tell yourself, it's fine. That's what parents do. You adjust. You accommodate. You tell yourself the temporary thing is still temporary, even when everything inside you knows the word has stopped meaning anything. The comments started small. Corbin mentioned once, at dinner, that I left grease marks on the kitchen counter from coming in from the shop. He said it with a half smile. The kind that means I'm just joking but also means I'm not. Paige laughed. I cleaned the counter and said nothing. Then it was my truck. 2 old oil drips on the driveway made the place look like a rental. Then it was the wood I'd stacked along the fence for winter projects. An eyesore, he said. Would I mind moving it somewhere less visible? Then it was the television in the living room. I'd been watching the news every morning since Carol was alive. Corbin liked to sleep until 9. The TV woke him up. Could I maybe use headphones or watch in my room? I bought headphones. 6 months ago, I met a woman at my church's Tuesday evening grief group. I'd started going 3 years after Carol died, finally ready to sit in a room full of strangers and admit I didn't have this handled. Her name is Winona. She's 61. A retired elementary school principal from a small town east of Knoxville, recently widowed, sharp as a box cutter, and twice as precise. We started having coffee after the Tuesday sessions, then walks. Then she cooked dinner for me twice, and I drove out to her place the third time with a pie I'd made from scratch, which I consider one of the better pies of my adult life. I mentioned Winona to Paige on a Sunday afternoon. Casual, no ceremony, just that I'd been spending time with someone, and it was good. Paige's expression shifted in a way I recognized. She'd inherited my poker face along with my stubbornness, but there's a tell around her eyes. She said, "That's nice, Dad," and looked at her phone. Corbin said nothing that day, but 2 nights later, I overheard them through the wall that now separated my bedroom from what used to be my office. Corbin's voice, low but not low enough. "She's going to be here all the time, in our space. We don't even know this woman." Paige's response was too quiet to hear. Then Corbin again. "He's not thinking about how this affects us. Our space." I lay in the dark and thought about that. My house. 31 years of mortgage payments. The addition I framed myself when Paige was 12 because Carol wanted a sunroom. The back porch I rebuilt plank by plank the year after Carol died because I needed something to do with my hands. Our space. I didn't say anything the next morning. I made coffee, drank it on the porch, watched the light come up over the ridge. 2 weeks later, I told them I'd like to have Winona over for Sunday dinner. Something simple, just a chance to get acquainted. Corbin was standing at my kitchen counter, eating a bowl of cereal he'd bought with money he'd borrowed from me 6 months prior and not mentioned since. He turned around slowly. "I don't think that's a good idea right now," he said. "Why not?" "We're not really in a place for that. Things are stressful with the business. We need the house to feel like a refuge, not a social event. It's my house to feel like a refuge, not a social event. It's my house, Corbin." Something moved across his face, not embarrassment. "Calculation. Doug," he said. He'd started calling me Doug sometime in the second year, never asked, just switched over. "We've all made sacrifices to make this work. I just think we should all have a say in major changes." Major changes. Dinner with a woman from my church. I left it alone that day. I spent a lifetime managing projects with difficult subcontractors. I know when to push and when to let the job site breathe. The text came on a Tuesday 3 weeks later. I told Paige that morning that I was planning to have Winona over Friday evening. Not asking, telling. She'd nodded, gone quiet, left for work. That evening, I was in the shop. My shop. What was left of it, trying to find my medium grit sanding blocks behind Corbin's demonstration units, when my phone buzzed. A text from Corbin's number. "Get lost, old man. You're done here. Paige agrees. We need this space for ourselves." I read it twice. Then I sat down on a stack of lumber that used to have a clear path around it. Here's what people don't understand about a moment like that. It's not just anger. Anger is too simple. What I felt in that shop, in the half-dark with the smell of sawdust and machine oil, was something older and heavier. It was the full weight of 3 years of small surrenders. The headphones, the coat closet, the hidden woodpile, the half-smile about grease on the counter, all of it landing at once. 6 words, and suddenly the arithmetic was inescapable. I thought about Paige as a 12-year-old, handing me tools through the framed walls of the sunroom addition, completely serious about the work, wanting to be useful. I thought about sitting in the same shop the week after Carol died, unable to do anything except run a hand plane back and forth across a board until my arm ached. I thought about every Sunday morning I'd made breakfast in that kitchen, every property tax bill, every repair I'd handled without complaint. I set my phone down. I didn't text back. I had a former colleague I'd worked with for 20 years in construction management. His name is Miles Garrett. He'd gone into real estate law after he retired from the field. property disputes, estate planning, landlord-tenant situations. We weren't close the way men talk about being close, but we respected each other in the way that 20 years of hard work, side by side, creates. I texted him that night, "Miles, need to sit down with you. Property matter. Sooner the better." He responded at 7 the next morning. Thursday, 2 p.m. My office. I slept fine that night. That surprised me. I'd expected to lie awake, turning it over. Instead, I felt something that took me until morning to identify. Clarity. Miles's office was on the west side of downtown, in a converted brick building that used to be a textile warehouse. We sat across from each other with coffee, and he listened without interrupting, which I appreciated. "How long have they been on the property?" he asked when I finished. 3 years and 4 months. "Written agreement of any kind? Lease, loan documentation, anything? Verbal, family arrangement?" He nodded slowly. "You're in Tennessee. Tenants without a written lease are considered month-to-month under state law. You can terminate that tenancy with proper notice." He pulled up something on his computer. 30 days written notice, delivered in a verifiable way. And the workshop? He's been operating a business out of my property. Miles raised an eyebrow. "Has he been paying you for that?" "Not a dollar." "Then you've been providing free commercial space for 3+ years. That's a separate issue." "Has his business generated any income?" "He claims it's growing. I've seen one deposit slip on my printer that he didn't know I saw. About $4,200 for a quarter. So no, not much." "Revenue or income?" "I don't know the difference in his case." Miles smiled slightly. "That's the right answer, actually. It means he hasn't been accounting for it carefully, which means he doesn't have documentation that would support any claim to tenancy rights on the commercial space." He leaned back. "Douglas, did you co-sign anything for them? Loans, leases, anything financial?" "I had. 2 things. A car loan for Paige when hers died 2 years ago, and a personal loan Corbin had taken out to purchase inventory, $18,500 at a credit union where I had a long relationship." He'd made 4 payments out of 36. "I can walk away from the co-signing," I told Miles. "Under certain circumstances, yes. Changed family circumstances, documented estrangement, your financial interest is at risk, especially given that he's in material default." He wrote something on a legal pad. "How long do you want to give them?" 30 days is what the law says. The law says 30 days is the minimum. You can give more. 30 days is enough. They've had 3 years of more time. Miles looked at me for a moment. "You've been thinking about this for a while." 2 years, I said. "I started talking to you in my head about 2 years ago. Took me this long to mean it." He almost smiled. "I'll prepare the notice. Certified mail and hand delivery. You want it to go out this week?" "Tomorrow, if you can manage it." That night, I went back to the shop and worked until midnight. Not on furniture. I was going through Corbin's inventory system, documenting what was mine and what was his, taking photographs on my phone with a timestamp running. 2 router tables. 1 was mine. 1 was new. 6 clamps on the pegboard, all mine. The shelving on the west wall. His. I documented everything with the methodical patience of a man who'd spent 30 years managing construction sites, where paperwork was the difference between the clean closeout and a lawsuit. I also called the credit union at 9 the next morning, spoke with a loan officer named Gene who'd processed the original note. I explained the situation. Gene explained the process. Within a week of my formal withdrawal as co-signer, Corbin would receive a letter stating the loan was under review and requiring either a replacement co-signer with qualifying income or full repayment of the remaining balance, $15,940. "What happens if he can't do either?" I asked. "We work with collections. His credit takes the hit, not yours." "Thank you, Gene." The notice arrived at my house by certified mail the next day, delivered to my own address, which was the legal address of record. I wasn't there. I was at Winona's, on her back porch with a cup of coffee and a book I wasn't really reading. My phone started buzzing at 10:14 in the morning. I watched the screen. Page, 3 times. Corbin, twice. Page again. I called Winona out to the porch. "What are you reading?" she asked. "Nothing useful. What do you want for lunch?" "We had sandwiches," I answered on the seventh call. Paige's voice was high and tight. "Dad, what is this? What did you do?" "I gave you 30 days' notice to find alternative housing. It's a standard legal notice. You can't just, this is our home." "It's my home, Paige. My name is on the deed. I've paid every property tax since 1993. You've been here as my guests. That arrangement is ending." "Because of Winona? This is about her, isn't it? This is about your husband telling me to get lost in my own house and claiming my property belongs to him." Silence. "Paige, did you know he was going to send that text?" More silence. Then, quietly, he showed it to me after. After he sent it. He was upset. He was upset. He was upset. He didn't mean it the way it sounded. He meant every word, and so do I. I set my coffee down on Winona's porch railing. 30 days, Paige. Miles Garrett prepared the paperwork. You're welcome to call him if you have questions about the process. She hung up. Corbin called 12 minutes later. I let it go to voicemail, listened once, deleted it. The words I remember were ungrateful, and after everything we've done, and you're going to regret this. I wrote those down, date and time, added the note to the file I'd started keeping. I moved into a furnished apartment in a clean complex on the north side of Knoxville 4 days later. 2 bedrooms, 1 converted to a small shop space, enough room for my hand tools and a workbench I built in 2 afternoons. I brought my important documents, my tools, my photographs of Carol, and 2 chairs I'd made myself from cherry wood that had dried in my shop for 6 years. Everything else could wait. The moment I carried the second chair through the apartment door, I felt something release in my chest, not quite joy. More like the feeling at the end of a long renovation when you finally set down the last tool and look at what you built. Winona helped me set up the small things. She had opinions about where the photograph should go, which I found I didn't mind at all. The next 3 weeks were quiet for me and apparently catastrophic for them. Paige called twice, leaving messages that moved from angry to frightened. Corbin called once, left nothing. My daughter-in-law's sister reached out on Facebook, a message I read once and didn't answer. Then Miles called on a Wednesday afternoon. "They haven't made any contact with my office," he said. "No request for extension, no payment attempt, no negotiation. They're hoping I'll back down." That's my read too. You're not backing down. No. The credit union sent their letter yesterday. Corbin has 14 days to respond. I did the math on his finances the way I always did with project budgets. His quarterly revenue was maybe $4,200, and that was a better quarter. Paige's salary was solid, around $62,000 a year, but she carried most of their personal expenses because Corbin's business losses offset his income for tax purposes. He was driving a leased BMW he put in her name 2 years ago to protect his credit. Their credit card balances, which I'd seen once on a statement Corbin left on the printer, totaled something north of $23,000. They had approximately zero capacity to repay $15,940 in 14 days. Paige showed up at my apartment on a Saturday morning. I saw her through the peephole, stood there for a moment, then opened the door. She looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. She was wearing clothes I recognized from 3 years ago. The expensive boutique phase had apparently ended. "Can I come in?" she asked. I stepped aside. She looked around the apartment. Saw the chairs. Saw the photographs of her mother on the small shelf I'd made and mounted by the door. "It's nice," she said, which wasn't what she came to say. "Sit down." We sat at the small kitchen table. I made coffee. We were quiet for a minute in the way that some silences hold more than words can. "Did Corbin send that text himself?" I asked. "Or did you know he was going to?" She wrapped her hands around the mug. "I didn't know. I found out after." She paused. "I should have said something to you when I found out. I should have called you right then." "Yes." "I didn't because I didn't want to fight. I kept thinking I could smooth it over." "You've been smoothing things over for 3 years, Paige. You watched your husband take apart my shop. You watched him move you both into my bedroom hallway. You heard him call it our space. And you smoothed it over. Her jaw tightened. She had Carol's jaw. I know. I'm not angry with you the way I'm angry with him. But you're not separate from this. I know that too. I looked at my daughter, 41 years old, smart enough to run circles around most people, sitting across from me looking like the 12-year-old who handed me tools through an unfinished wall. What are you going to do? I asked. I don't know yet. She looked at her hands. Corbin wants to fight the eviction. His cousin is a paralegal and thinks there might be grounds. There aren't. Miles has been doing Tennessee property law for 18 years. Have Corbin call him if he wants the details explained. I told him that. And? She didn't answer. Paige, I love you. That doesn't change. But I will not be moved on this. Not by guilt, not by paralegal cousins, not by whatever story Corbin tells himself about what he deserves. I gave them 30 days. I gave you 3.5 years. That's what I had to give. She left an hour later without resolution, but without ugliness either. That felt like something. The court date came 6 weeks after the notice. I won't linger on it because there wasn't much drama in the room. Miles presented the deed, the tax records, the notice documentation, the certified mail receipt, the judge. A woman around 60 with the expression of someone who'd seen this exact situation 17 times that month, asked Corbin twice if he had any documentation establishing a tenancy agreement, a payment history, or any legal claim to the property. He did not. She ruled in my favor, 14 days to vacate, enforceable by the sheriff's office. Corbin turned to look at me from across the courtroom. I looked back at him the way I look at a load calculation on a blueprint. Just checking the numbers. Outside on the courthouse steps, Miles shook my hand. Clean as it gets, he said. Thank you, Miles. What are you doing with the house? Listing it, I said. I've already talked to a realtor. The property had appreciated significantly since 1993. I expected to net somewhere north of $280,000 after the mortgage payoff and fees, more than enough to buy something smaller, somewhere quieter, and keep a cushion. He nodded. And the business assets in the shop? Documented and photographed. Anything of his that's left after 14 days gets treated according to Tennessee abandoned property law. Miles knows the statute. Miles almost smiled again. I do know the statute. I drove home to my apartment, which had started feeling like home in the easy way that spaces do when nobody's making you apologize for being in them, and called Winona. How did it go? She asked. The way it was supposed to. Come for dinner. I'm making chicken and dumplings. Yes, ma'am. Corbin and Paige were out of the house by the 12th day. My neighbor across the street, a retired nurse named Gail who'd known me for 20 years, texted me a photo of the moving truck. They hadn't rented a house. They'd moved into Paige's co-worker's spare room while they figured things out, which I heard through Gail and didn't pursue further. 3 days after they left, I walked through the house with my realtor. The damage in the workshop was significant. Wall anchors pulled out, the concrete floor stained with hydraulic fluid from Corbin's demo units, 2 outlet panels overloaded with extension adapters in a way that would have kept a building inspector busy for an hour. I photographed everything, sent it to the insurance company, filed a claim. The payout covered most of the remediation. The credit union sent me a courtesy notification 4 weeks after the court date. Corbin had defaulted on the loan. The vehicle, Paige's car technically, had been repossessed from a parking garage downtown. His credit score, according to a mutual contact who worked in banking and had no obligation to keep quiet about it, had dropped to somewhere around 510. I did not feel triumphant about that. I want to be honest about what I felt. Mostly, I'd felt the absence of something I'd been carrying so long I'd stopped noticing the weight of it. The house listed on a Thursday. By Sunday, I had 3 offers. I accepted the second one. A couple in their late 30s, both teachers, wanted the workshop space for a pottery studio. They were patient, careful people who asked the right questions about the foundation. I liked them. Closing was 41 days later. I walked through the empty house one last time the morning before, stood in the shop for a few minutes. The light came in at the angle it always had, through the south-facing window I'd framed in 1997. I remembered the sound of Carol's voice calling me in for dinner through that window. I remembered Paige as a teenager sweeping sawdust off the workbench without being asked. Those things were mine to keep. The house was just the container. I locked up, handed the keys to the realtor, and drove to get coffee. Paige called me 6 weeks after the closing. Not Corbin, Paige. She asked if I'd be willing to have lunch. I said yes, and meant it. We met at a diner on the north side, a place we used to go when she was in high school. She looked better than she had at my apartment. Steadier. She'd been seeing a therapist, she said, working through some things. She and Corbin were in couples counseling too, though she said it with the careful neutrality of someone who wasn't certain how it was going to resolve. I owe you more than an apology, she said over coffee. I know that. I let things happen that I should have stopped. I kept choosing the easier thing. You were grieving when you met him, I said. You wanted someone to hold things together. I understand that. That doesn't excuse it. No, but it explains some of it. I looked at her. I'm not done with you, Paige. I was never close to done with you. You're my daughter, and you're Carol's daughter, and none of this changes that. Her eyes went wet. She didn't wipe them, just let them be. That was Carol's way, too. What about Corbin? She asked. That depends on Corbin, not on what he says, on what he does and how long he does it before asking me to notice. She nodded like she understood exactly what that meant. We finished lunch without resolution, which is different from finishing without hope. I hugged her in the parking lot. She held on for a moment longer than I expected. I let her. Winona asked about it that evening while we were on her porch watching the sky go dark over the ridge. She's trying, I said. That's real. And him? I don't know yet. I'm in no hurry to find out. She was quiet for a minute. Then, you're very patient for someone who's supposed to be angry. I've been angry. I worked through most of it in that apartment while nobody was watching. I looked at the tree line. What's left isn't anger. It's just knowing what I'm worth. Knowing what I'll accept and what I won't. That's a different thing. She reached over and put her hand on mine. We sat there while the fireflies started up in the field below the porch. I've thought a lot about what I tell someone in the same position, not the legal steps. Miles can explain those, and he's better at it than I am. The harder thing to explain is the internal part, the moment you realize that patience has become something else. That accommodation has crossed into erasure. That the people you've been protecting from consequences have been protected so long, they've forgotten consequences exist. You can't force people to appreciate what you've given them. I tried that for 3 years, in the quiet way of doing more, giving more, adjusting more, hoping eventually the scale would tip. It doesn't work. Some people only understand what they had when it's documented in a court record and enforced by a sheriff's deputy. The morning I signed the closing paperwork on my house, I sat in my truck in the parking lot of the title company for about 10 minutes before I went inside. Not second-guessing, just taking inventory. Everything I'd built in that house was already gone. Carol, the Sunday mornings, the evenings in the shop, the person I'd been when all of that was intact. What was left was a structure, 4 walls and a foundation and 30 years of property taxes. I was selling a structure. I was keeping the rest. Now I live in a house I bought last spring. Smaller, a 1-story on 3 acres outside of Maryville, with a proper shop building already on the property, higher ceilings than my old one, better electrical. I've got 22 pieces in the queue, a blanket chest, a rocking chair, someone commissioned from a photo of their grandmothers, a set of kitchen cabinets for a young couple I met through the church. I work mornings and have afternoons free. Winona drives over Tuesdays and Thursdays. We've talked about other arrangements. We're taking our time, which at 64 is not the same as being uncertain. It's choosing well. Paige and I have lunch about once a month. She and Corbin are still together, still in counseling. He got a W-2 job with a medical device company, steadier than the business he was running. Actual benefits. He hasn't called me directly. I expect he will at some point. I haven't decided yet what I'll say, but I've thought about it. I know what I'll require. I know what I'll require. I know what I won't accept. That's more than I knew 3 years ago. The shop out here has a south-facing window too. Different angle, different light. Every morning, it comes in low across the workbench while I drink coffee and figure out where to start. The work is the same. Patient, precise, one piece at a time. I got a text from Paige last Tuesday. Not about anything urgent. Just a photo of a rocking chair she'd seen in a magazine. Could you build something like this? I looked at the joinery in the photo, the through tenons on the back slats, the way the arms curved up into the posts. Solid work, nothing I couldn't do. I texted back, yes. Give me a few months. She sent a heart emoji, and I put my phone in my pocket and went back to the workbench. Outside the window, the Tennessee morning was doing what it does in late spring. Slow and golden and unhurried. No text messages, no one waiting to tell me I was in the way. Just the work and the light and the quiet satisfaction of a man who finally chose himself. That was enough. More than enough. People ask me sometimes if I regret how it played out. Not whether I regret selling the house or pulling the cosign or filing the eviction notice. They ask if I regret waiting so long to do it. And I've thought about that honestly. The way you think about a load-bearing wall you ignored for 2 years before it cracked. The answer is complicated. I don't regret the patience. I think patience is what separates a man who acts from wisdom from a man who just reacts from pain. What I regret is mistaking endurance for strategy. I endured Corbin's quiet takeover of my shop, my office, my kitchen counter, my morning television. I told myself I was being the bigger person. What I was actually doing was teaching him that I had no floor, that there was no line I'd hold, and people, not all of them, but some of them, will walk as far as you let them walk. That's not a judgment about Corbin specifically. That's just how it works when someone has never been required to account for what they take. The entitlement wasn't malicious at its root. It was just untested. Nobody had ever handed him a consequence that stuck. So he kept going, and I kept moving furniture into smaller rooms, and neither of us was being honest about what was actually happening. What I've learned, and I mean learned the hard way, in the way that real learning costs something, is that kindness without a boundary isn't kindness. It's just a loan with no repayment date, and eventually the person borrowing stops thinking of it as a loan at all. They think of it as their right. Corbin didn't see himself as taking anything from me. He genuinely believed he was entitled to what he had, because I had never shown him otherwise. The moment I read that text in my shop, I wasn't just angry at him. I was disappointed in myself for letting it get that far. 31 years building structures that had to hold weight under pressure, and I'd let my own foundation erode because I didn't want to cause a scene at the dinner table. What turned things around wasn't anger. Anger burns fast and leaves a mess. What turned it around was decision. A quiet, clear, irreversible decision that I was done negotiating my own dignity. That's a different kind of strength than people expect. It doesn't raise its voice. It calls a lawyer. It photographs inventory. It moves a cherrywood chair into a smaller apartment and feels lighter for it. Paige is still my daughter. That was never in question. But I had to be honest with her too. Not cruel, not punishing, just honest, that her silence had been its own kind of choice. People who love you can still fail you, and you can still love them back while requiring them to do better. Those two things aren't in conflict. They just feel like they are when you haven't practiced holding both at once. I'm 64 years old. I have 3 acres outside of Maryville and a shop with better electrical than the one I built 30 years ago, and 22 pieces of work in the queue. I have Winona on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and a daughter who sends me photos of rocking chairs she wants me to build. The morning light still comes in low across the workbench. The work is still the same. Patient, precise, one piece at a time. You get to choose who has access to your life. That's not selfishness. That's the most basic form of self-respect there is. And the day I finally acted on it was the day I stopped surviving and started living.